Huge doors opened in front of the owner of the estate, letting him in. Coming out to meet him, the heroine joyfully greeted her dear husband. Smiling affably, she wondered if he was tired today. Glancing coldly back at her, the Duke closed his eyes and decided that he would go to bed in another room that day. After that, he calmly walked past his wife with a very annoyed look. Smelling fresh grass, the girl realized that apparently they had seen each other again. It was a scent coming from the body of a woman named Serena, whom her husband is secretly dating. Passing by his wife, the Duke went to his room when suddenly he heard her voice. Turning sharply to him, the heroine called out to her husband, wanting to talk to him. Furious, he didn't understand why she kept bothering him when he was so tired. In turn, the girl was also perplexed, because does she really annoy him so much that the hero cannot even listen to her? In response, the Duke decided that if she had any understanding, she should not interfere with his rest. After that, he went into his room and slammed the door, leaving the heroine alone with the servants and his confusion. Biting her lip, she was furious that this man would not even allow her to express her desire to divorce him. The bastard not only dates another woman but also treats his own wife so coldly. Seeing that she went to the door to the master's room, the maids immediately became agitated and blocked her way. The heroine ordered them to move away, but the maids felt that they could not disobey his lordship's order. Then, calmly shoving them aside, the girl abruptly opened the door, confusing everyone. Calling her husband Oscar again, she looked straight at him resolutely. Taken aback by what he heard, the hero grinned, not understanding whether she had not heard him. Looking back at him coldly, the heroine decided that now they were divorcing. Some believe that adversity ignites love like a forbidden fruit that always seems sweeter. The girl was the very obstacle on the way of the main character, which made the main character a sweeter fruit. She got into an affair with a suffering garbage duke in the lead role. The heroine herself became Milena Clodwell, who was his partner in a marriage of convenience. She was also a villain who was born the daughter of the noble Marquis of Lowy, and her only goal in life was Oscar. Despite the fact that there are goals and order in aristocratic marriages, she screamed and raged, wanting to marry only the Duke. The heroine decided that the longer they delayed her marriage to the Oscar, the more their family's reputation would be tarnished. Sighing heavily, her father realized that it was useless to argue because she had learned stubbornness from him. In the end, the Marquis decided to use the last lever of pressure to change Milena's decision. He wanted to know if she would really give up all her rights as a resident of Lowy Island and marry without love. If a girl wants to marry Oscar by behaving in this way, she will be kicked out of the family and lose all her possessions. Although the Duke of Clodwell was a member of a side branch of the royal family, the Marquis of Lowy still had much greater influence and authority. In terms of conditions and common sense, there was no need to rush the wedding, but Milena insisted on it. As a result, my father gave up, realizing that there was not a single chance for a different outcome of events. After a while, he came to the Duke's house and, bowing his head, managed to get consent to the wedding. So the heroine brought shame on her family and soon married Oscar, getting his surname. But unfortunately, Milena was not the main character, and it was thanks to her that the love of the real main characters was set. The girl herself very quickly became a villain and an obstacle on the way to their happiness. Of course, the relationship between the Duke and Serena could not be called normal, because after the wedding he locked his mistress in a shed. He began to visit her regularly, and Serena was initially against it, as he is now married. However, she soon decided that this man and his heart still belonged to her. Reading Serena's insults to Milena and her relationship with Oscar, which were considered the norm in the novel, the heroine was in quiet shock. This story took first place in the reader's rating, and it was funny to watch how the main characters were scolded in the comments. And all this is pleasant to watch only in the role of a spectator chewing popcorn, but who would be pleased to be in the body of a villain who has nothing? In addition, Milena was too impulsive, and one day Oscar got tired of her maniacal obsession, after which he insisted on a divorce. At the same moment, the girl found out about Serena's existence and, in complete despair, decided to kill her, but was stopped by the Duke. At the moment when Oscar almost lost his beloved, he was filled with sadness, and Serena closed her heart, after which the final act came. Therefore, in order not to demonstrate a strong obsession with the hero, the girl was going to go into the sunset as soon as she got a divorce. However, Oscar was in no hurry to offer it, and it was not known how long to wait, so the heroine decided to act. Hearing her demand for a divorce, the Duke was completely discouraged and looked at her in bewilderment. He decided that she was just attracting attention, because since she had been kicked out of the family, she would clearly not be able to pay alimony. Smiling back, Milena did not want to upset him, but it was Oscar who would have to pay the alimony. Laughing, the hero decided that she had become so stupid that she had even forgotten the laws of the kingdom. The heroine understood him perfectly, because he mistakenly believes that the law will be on his side. According to the Constitution, alimony is paid by the one who initiated the divorce, and this was in order to prevent the dissolution of marriages. The original Milena, not the heroine, wanted to marry Oscar, so he waited for the Duke to decide to divorce himself. However, her patience ran out, and resolutely heading towards him, the girl wanted to clarify if he knew Lady Serena. Confused, Oscar did not understand how his wife knew this name. Seeing that the maids were still in his room, he shouted and ordered them to leave immediately. Left alone with her, the Duke was numb with shock and stared at Milena in bewilderment. Smiling sweetly, the girl decided that if the divorce was on his part, then she would keep this secret a secret. At this time, the hero looked at her and did not understand if this was the heroine he knew. Until then, no matter how much he showed his disgust, she had continued to follow him around. Milena always groveled before the Duke in order to obtain at least some empty affection on his part. Now, in front of him, there was a confident and unshakable woman who knew that he would find a way to make money. On the other hand, if his reputation suffers as a result of a scandal, even with money, it will be difficult to restore it. Scratching his head bitterly, the hero did not even expect that she would think of such a thing. Oscar recalled that there used to be bad rumors about the heroine, but her reputation improved a lot after marrying him. She was known as a tomboy of the Lowy family, and a girl who could freely touch other men while unmarried. She decided to marry him, and for this, she even gave up her rights to her property. But what happens if the Duke is caught having an affair with a slave girl and finds out that he looks down on his wife and is cold to her, despite all her love for him? Then, all people will take the side of Milena, while the hero and Serena will be cursed by the whole world. Therefore, Oscar, who had been working on his reputation for years, could not afford to allow such a thing. Moreover, he couldn't let this stupid woman destroy all his efforts. As he stood, deep in thought and numb with shock, Milena watched him calmly, waiting for an answer. But when she heard nothing, she decided to give him time to think, and the Duke immediately came to his senses. Turning around and heading for the exit, the heroine hoped that he would not delay the decision. Therefore, she decided to give him time until tomorrow morning, and after that, there would be no way back. Completely confused by her words and the fact that she was leaving so calmly, the hero was dismayed. The fact that she herself left his room was already a shock for him, because in a normal situation, the heroine would cry and beg to sleep with her. Suddenly, Oscar realized that people can't change overnight, and for sure it was just a show to attract attention. It may also have been a warning to him to be faithful to his marriage if she had found his weakness. Realizing that in this case there was only one way out, the Duke gently called his wife by name. Gracefully ruffling his hair, he decided that all this time he had been too indifferent to her and did not notice what the girl wanted. At this moment, he suddenly noticed that although the heroine was not as good as Serena, but in general, her face was quite pretty. Usually, Milena always persuaded him to kiss her, so today, the Duke decided to do it himself. Meanwhile, completely confused, the heroine did not understand what he was doing. Pushing him away with force, she decided that it was too disgusting of him. It seems that the hero did not invent something in his head, so the girl decided to clarify that he was greatly mistaken. Oscar stood in complete confusion at what was happening, looking at the enraged Milena, who looked at him with contempt. Indignantly declaring that he spoiled her mood, the heroine hurried out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Before the door closed completely, she caught a glimpse of the Duke's dazed face through the crack. Once in the corridor, she stopped for a while to catch her breath. Considering Oscar a real madman, the heroine did not understand why he would kiss her. How could he even think of kissing Milena after her decision to divorce? This came as a surprise to her, because it seemed to her that if he had the opportunity to be with Serena, then everything would go smoothly. The heroine would never have thought that Oscar would try to kiss her, and didn't he really like the divorce proceedings? In any case, the original plot has already been irreparably damaged, which means you need to be on the alert. Now when, unlike the original, the hero did not intend to give her comforts, the girl may have problems after the divorce. She gave up her status on Loei Island in order to get married, and she couldn't afford to stay in the capital. No matter how hard she bows her head, a father will not accept his daughter after a shameful marriage and divorce. For Malena, who had neither the status of a duchess nor any property, divorce was the worst option. It must have been so at first, but now everything has changed dramatically. The heroine would not ask for a divorce without having any alternative. However, she was very lucky because she was able to remember something that was almost not mentioned in the original. In fact, it was very unexpected to discover that Malena had such connections as, for example, a distant relative, Count Baltus. His family was known for its short-lived life due to poor health. However, the heroine's mother also died of an illness at a young age. The Count had no children, much less nephews, but after his death was announced, Malena was quietly contacted. He invited his distant relative to come to him, and if it were a real heroine, then she would not go. But the girl still decided to go for a few days, pretending that she wanted to cause her husband's jealousy, and as a result, she began to go there regularly. Thanks to his relationship with Oscar, he didn't even suspect anything, because he didn't care. Despite the fact that she was a distant relative with whom the Count had little contact, he was very friendly to the heroine. She often came just to chat, sometimes read books to him as his vision was blurred, and they also danced the waltz together. Time flew by, and in the end, lying on his deathbed, the Count decided that people did not understand Malena, because inside she was a cute child. The girl understood that this was a misunderstanding and she was not a real heroine, but this could not be said. Of course, she had a younger brother, albeit from another mother, who is now attending the successors' classes to become Loei's next head. Thus, Malena was the only remaining relative to whom the Count could turn. Dying in front of her eyes, he believed that the last 2 months of his life were full of joy, thanks to the girl. Therefore, he decided that he would not regret if he transferred his property and title to her. The will and letter left by the Count were sent to the heroine after his death a few days ago. At the moment when it gets to the department for official consideration, the heroine will become Countess Malena Baltus. If Oscar finds out about the Baltus family's property, he will never ask for a divorce first. After all, if the heroine does this, then by law she will have to pay alimony, so she will have to keep everything secret for now. When the divorce proceedings are over and she inherits the Count, the Duke will not be able to collect additional alimony from her. In the worst case, even if she had to demand a divorce first, all she would give him as alimony was a few jewels. In fact, this inheritance was not so important, and the girl would have been happy if the Count had lived at least a little longer. He became her first friend in this world, but he left too soon and Malena missed him. But no matter how hard it was, she still intended to try to live well. In the will, the hero indicated that she needed to show what she was worth, so for the sake of herself and her uncle, the girl could not give his fortune to her husband. To do this, you need to create a situation in which Oscar himself will demand a divorce, while not arousing unnecessary suspicion. It was necessary to deal him a crushing blow, and if everything went smoothly, it would certainly work. The heroine was going to arrange such a sweet life for him that the Duke would have no choice but to demand a divorce. After a while, she sat at the same table with Oscar during the afternoon meal. The girl decided that it must be something important, since he himself invited her to a joint dinner. Of the servants, only the butler remained, and this is probably because the hero is afraid that Malena will open her mouth in the direction of Serena again. Suddenly he decided that he had invited her here to improve her married life, which made the heroine smile ironically. The Duke was ready to admit that he had not been a good husband for her until now, and he understood why she was demanding a divorce. Therefore, the hero decided that now he will try to spend more time with her. If there had been a real Malena in front of him, she would have shed tears. However, to his regret, the heroine was no longer the same. Taking advantage of this chance, the girl intended to hear a divorce statement. This meant that in the next 10 minutes he had to give his best. Looking feignedly puzzled, she didn't even know if he should try. But Oscar hoped that she would think carefully, because Malena had always wanted a happy, married life. But according to the heroine, this was possible only when you do not know about the existence of a mistress. Therefore, she could not even imagine what he was thinking about proposing such a thing. With a chuckle, she decided that if he wanted to have an affair, he had to make sure he wasn't caught. Therefore, proudly squinting her eyes in a snide mockery, Malena understood that she could not live with such a stupid husband. Naturally, such a narcissistic turkey could not stand such an insult addressed to him and went berserk. He found his wife's words very rude, which made the girl laugh, and she decided to give her voice even more sharpness in order to push Oscar. She didn't understand how such filth could come out of his mouth when he himself had destroyed the trust in their marriage. Unless he was going to leave Serena, then he should already abandon this stupid idea and empty promises of a happy marriage. Grudging his teeth in annoyance, the Duke immediately demanded an apology, believing that she would certainly regret her words. However, in her opinion, it is he who should apologize, otherwise the hero can prepare for an interview with journalists. Knowing how important his reputation was to him, the heroine understood how to put pressure on his weaknesses. After all, even if he ran to Iselba Street right now and hid Serena, it would be difficult to shut the mouths of those who had seen this brown-haired woman. Now that he had pinpointed out the location and appearance of his mistress, he would no longer be able to deny her existence. Grinning haughtily and looking intently at the Duke, Malena decided that he himself would regret it later. Numb with shock, Oscar began to shout at her in a frenzy, agreeing to divorce her soon. In addition, the hero even agreed to pay alimony because, as she herself knew, he earns money quickly. Most of all, he was annoyed by her words that he would regret it, because the Duke knew for sure that it was his narrow-minded wife who would regret it. Taking a deep breath, the heroine pretended that she did not even understand what she could regret here. Grinning maliciously, Oscar thought that even if Malena received alimony from him, she would not be able to spend it in the capital. Without the status of his family, the girl will be despised by all the aristocrats in this country. From the palace to the farthest southern gate, there was no place that Oscar could not reach to spoil her life. Mentally grinning, the heroine was even a little surprised how accurately his words met her expectations. Having feigned fright, she stared at the hero, deciding that this could not be. It is worth noting that in her past life, the girl played in the big theater. She was the best actor among all her colleagues. She was the best specialist in improvisation. So she could easily pretend to be obsessed with the Oscar, and at the moment, the heroine pretended to regret her words. Proudly straightening his back, the Duke decided that because of his short-sightedness, the heroine did not think about what awaited her after the divorce. Looking confused, Malena admitted her mistake and wanted to discuss everything again. Smirking in response, the hero thought that she herself had closed the way for a peaceful conversation. It was necessary to make him feel that he was in control of the situation, as if he were punishing her for her arbitrariness. The girl hoped that Oscar would understand her and not take her personally, but the Duke was now determined to divorce. After all, then he would finally have no last reason to be polite to someone like her. The heroine understood that now she had to play her role, but this whole situation angered her more and more. And now it's time for the culmination of this dialogue, which will be the cherry on the cake. Her eyes filled with tears, and humbly folding her hands, Malena looked at the hero pleadingly. Feeling even more superior, he could no longer hear this disgusting treatment. Wanting to go to the theater immediately, he ordered the butler to clean everything here. Seeing him off with a sad look, the girl doomedly wiped away her tears with her hand. Later, while in his theater and sitting in his office, Oscar was puzzled as to how this stupid woman was able to find Serena's address. Surely it was a happy accident, and if you hide the mistress and hide it more carefully, then nothing will happen. If Malena was so perceptive, she could have thought about what she had to lose. The hero decided that he was wrong yesterday to be afraid of changes in the girl, and she would not be able to do anything to him. Considering her an empty place without a title and money, Oscar decided to call the butler Albert and find out how she behaved after he left. In response, he heard that Malena was sobbing with grief and begging him to speak to his master. Laughing, the Duke thought that she had come this far without even knowing her place, but now she seemed to understand where it was. Now, he intended to divorce her, as the heroine herself wanted. Until now, he had allowed the girl to crawl at his feet, but the moment she decided to get up, she was finished. For daring to threaten him, the Grand Duke of Cloudwell, he wanted to send her to the bottom of the quagmire. Every day, in his theater, all performances were sold out because of the good location, and its facade was even a landmark. The dream of all young people who came to the capital was to get into the exclusive, theatrical troupe of the Grand Theater of Cloudwell. Before the heroine got into this world, she always dreamed of doing dramatic productions. She boldly turned to Oscar, wanting to become an actress in his theater, but he was dismissive of this idea and immediately refused. However, there was absolutely no point in thinking about the past now. When Milena is successfully divorced, she will be able to go to study acting herself. And now, by order of the Duke, she arrived at his theater and entered from the main entrance. At this time, one of the employees was there, who was confused when he saw the Duchess. Shaking with fear, he immediately approached her with a confused look, not understanding what had happened. The girl did not understand. Isn't it natural for a wife to come to work for her husband? The poor employee even sweated with fear, thinking that he would be in trouble if he missed the mistress. Realizing how much Oscar neglected his wife, he was more and more unpleasant to the heroine, but for now she had to put up with it. It was time to raise the curtain for the start of the play, and Milena decided to clarify that the Duke himself had summoned her. Now she played the role of a wife who ran as soon as her husband called her. Trying to look as nervous and confused as possible, she did not understand why the employee was standing still and not accompanying her. Not understanding anything, the hero decided to clarify everything first, when suddenly another theater employee appeared. Smiling at the Duchess, he was very glad to see her and hastened to inform her that the headmaster was already waiting for her in his office. It was Oscar's deputy, and the girl was glad that at least someone was smart here. He immediately hurried to escort the lady to meet his superior. Later, when Milena came to him and sat down with the Duke on the sofa, she stretched out her hands to the divorce paper. Seeing that she dared to come here without gloves, Oscar decided that she had no self-esteem left at all. This was because the hero demanded to come to him as soon as possible, so naturally the heroine did not have time to put on gloves. Looking thoughtfully at the document, she was in no hurry to take it in her hands, calmly sitting in place. Oscar did not understand her reaction, because these were the documents that she herself wanted. Besides, he politely filled out everything that was necessary. Throwing a pen to her, he decided that the girl only had to sign them, and then everything would be over. Milena wanted to object, but the hero did not let her say a word, continuing to insist on a signature. He didn't understand. Had she forgotten that she had created this situation herself? The girl could hardly restrain herself from rolling her eyes because, unfortunately, she had to restrain herself. Bringing the pen to the sheet, she realized that her plan was almost over and she just needed to speed up the deadline for submitting an application. Remembering that according to the agreement they still have a period to think, the heroine decided that perhaps she could change the Duke's mind. Abruptly grabbing the document, he decided to rid her of useless illusions and make sure that there was no period. Everything was going exactly according to Milena's plan, but it was too early to relax, and now it was necessary to hammer the last nail into the lid of this coffin. She remembered that in order to settle the issue of considering the divorce, it was necessary to pay an additional fee, which she did not have. The Duke decided that this was a problem only for her, because for such a poor thing this was really an impressive amount. Realizing that without this the divorce would not take place, he decided not to waste time and nerves on this, so he would pay for everything himself. Defiantly shedding a tear, the heroine pretended that this was not what she meant at all. In fact, she was grateful to him for this and was glad that even here she managed to save money. Having finished signing the contract, they left the office and were met in the corridor by the deputy. After handing him the documents, Oscar wanted his employee to immediately run to hand them over and back. The hero was very puzzled, because by the time he gets to the department, it may already be closed. Enraged by his words, the Duke immediately shouted at his subordinate, ordering him to complete the task by any means necessary. Not understanding how he could behave like this with his deputy, the girl knew that no one would believe that he behaved like this. Noticing her gaze on the hero, Oscar decided that she dared to hope to get help from him. In about 3 days, the application will be processed, and until then, she can enjoy the title of Duchess of Cloudwell for a little longer. Hearing that in any case he would take this from her later, Milena did not understand whether he was the main character or the villain. In this case, she decided to end the show by making a real villain out of him. Proudly straightening her back and standing in front of him, the heroine shouted in the face of her ex-husband, believing that he would definitely regret it. After that, without waiting for a reaction, she turned sharply and headed for the exit. Even before reaching the door, the girl demonstratively whimpered a couple more times for authenticity. However, once outside, she laughed heartily, feeling an unprecedented lightness. Milena was glad that it was enough just to show a tearful look. But now there was no time to cast tears, and from that moment on, she had a lot to do. 3 days later, the divorce application will be approved, and as a still obedient wife at the moment, the heroine decided to enjoy the title. Not knowing where to start with, she resolutely went to the bank. She needed to rent a safe deposit box to store the Count's inheritance, which she would inherit in the near future. In addition, it was also necessary to use the status of a duchess, so soon the girl found herself in front of a bank employee. Upon hearing the request to rent a safe deposit box, the worker wanted to register it in Claudwell's name, but the heroine decided that it would be better to register it in her name. As for the name of Duke Oscar Claudwell, Milena decided to apply for a large loan in his name. After receiving consent, she also hoped to get approval within an hour. Then the employee decided to offer a special option, and this loan can be approved immediately since she is a duchess. At such moments, the girl especially liked her aristocrat status, and she decided that she wanted to get the maximum amount. She was also especially pleased that the interest rate would be very high, since this is a term loan. Milena wanted to squeeze as much out of him as she could and then run away, because he himself allowed her to enjoy the title of duchess. Now it remains only to wait for the receipt of the money, and in the meantime, another employee decided to accompany her to the rented box. The safe deposit box was a 3-step safe with first-class security, intended only for the aristocracy. The password would be known only to the heroine, so it was possible to pick it up slowly. Milena was glad, believing that it was worth making such a long journey to the Royal Central Bank for the sake of such security. After showing her everything, the employee was ready to turn away so that the mistress could enter the password and put what she wanted in the safe. Since her most valuable thing was a letter with a will, it was decided to put it. In order for the letterbox not to stand out, the heroine also decided to put some jewelry. Now, the Earl's will is officially under the protection of the Royal Central Bank. This means that until the country collapses, no one can steal or burn it. Having hidden everything in the safe, Milena was ready to return, and the employee hoped that she had been informed about the conditions for using the safe deposit box. The heroine knew that after a week of the contract, all contents would be destroyed if she did not show up for it. However, she intended to take care of taking everything up to that point, so there was nothing to worry about. Rejoicing that everything was going smoothly, the girl remembered that she had carefully and scrupulously thought out the plan. The divorce will be formalized in 3 days, so a week for a sell will be enough. Soon, the bank prepared an application for a loan in the amount of 50 million for the mistress. This amount was quite enough, and the girl began to happily count the banknotes. After thanking the staff for their good work, she left, accompanied by flattering goodbyes. In 3 days, you will need to go to the department and find out if the divorce issue has been resolved, and then take the will out of the safe. Upon officially inheriting, she will take possession of the mansion of the Count of Balthus, which will be registered in her name. It has been empty for a long time and no one has taken care of it, but at least this way he will be able to afford his own house in the capital. The money she borrowed will go to her accommodation during this week, and in the future, she needs to think about how to make money. It was the first time Milena had felt so excited since she had been in this body. He was happy that he would finally be able to live like a human being after divorcing this scum. She had to save money to allow herself lush and luxurious outfits in order to look happy in the eyes of others. Otherwise, Oscar rudely pointed it out to the heroine, believing that she was a disgrace to him. However, Milena loved him so much that she tolerated such treatment and never said a word that she was not satisfied with all this. She only craved the love of her husband, who did not care deeply about her feelings. Once in her body, the girl tried to earn money on her own, but the Duke constantly stopped it. He did not understand whether she knew what it meant to an aristocrat and mistress of the house to do extraneous business. This means that her husband is not competent enough, since the woman herself began to earn money. Therefore, the hero was perplexed. Did she really want him to look so pathetic in the eyes of others? And now, the heroine was deeply relieved that she didn't have to listen to it anymore. Oscar had always ignored her, but now it was time to put him in his place. Milena intended to start living her life under the title of Countess of Balthus. Meanwhile, the Duke decided that Serena's new home should be in a quiet area of Ruhini. It was a little further away from where he had been, and he also had to stay away from prying eyes when he came there. Suddenly, he heard the ringing of a magical device, which could not be ignored if the call had already arrived. Hearing Lowell's voice on the trumpet, Oscar realized that it had something to do with the Royal Central Bank. The employee contacted the hero to notify him of the loan taken by the Duchess in his name for procedural reasons. Hearing this, the Duke was stunned on the spot and felt a chill run down his spine. Grudging his teeth with anger, he did not understand how a woman dared to do such a thing. In addition, he began to yell at the bank employee, not understanding how they could approve this loan without his permission. As it turned out, banking policy had nothing to do with it, and since the Duke of Clodwell was in good standing, it was enough for approval. However, this was not the problem, and Oscar could not understand how the bank allowed a stranger to take out a loan in his name. Taken aback by what he heard, Lowell reminded his master that the Duchess also had the surname Clodwell. This works not only with the bank, but with all the laws of the kingdom, for which husband and wife were one person. The hero still continued to insist that he should have at least been asked, but as it turned out, the amount was not so significant. In addition, his wife decided to take an instant loan, so the confirmation procedure for taking it was not provided. In any case, Lowell thought that a loan of $50 million was a trifle for his lordship. Oscar was deeply dismayed by what had happened, not understanding whether his stupid wife had calculated everything in advance. The employee was right, and the loan amount was not burdensome for him. The Duke could immediately close this notorious loan, but the problem was different. He didn't understand how Milena had dared to treat him so meanly. And yet, it seemed strange to him that despite blocking access to the account for the girl, she was still approved for a loan. However, according to the bank employee, it was about a deposit account, while loans were a completely different category. Deciding that he did not know this, the Duke now began to doubt the competence of the bank. Then Lowell decided that it was strange for him to block access for his wife. It was very difficult for the hero to soften this question without damaging the image of the Duke. Therefore, he wanted the master to pull himself together and calm down first of all. Mad with frustration, Oscar did not understand whether the hero was ignoring his status because his business was connected with the theater. The Duchy of Clodwell has a rich history and is closely linked to royal blood. The grandfather of the current duke was the king's brother, and his family has earned the title of the most noble dynasty in the kingdom of Arlo. However, the previous king had always feared that these blood ties could lead to political strife. Therefore, he did everything to distance himself from the duke, but fortunately, they still had their own theatrical business. Therefore, the hero could not take a step towards politics, and guys like Lowell easily ignored him. Deciding to end the conversation with this, the bank employee thought that it would be difficult for him to continue secretly working for the Duke. He had no idea that Oscar would be so angry about $50 million. Hearing the beeps after that, the Duke was very indignant because it was beneficial for him to keep in touch with this man. It was necessary to clarify that he considered Milena a stranger because they were divorcing, but because of this girl, he lost his temper for a moment. Later, the heroine calmly enjoyed a wonderful tea, watching the beautiful views from the window. The thought of how angry the Duke would be when he found out about the loan made her feel warmer. But the most he can do is get a little angry and stop, and if he does not repay the loan, then the interest will continue to drip. In this case, the girl should immediately go shopping and enjoy everything that she could not try before. Having called herself the best carriage of the Red Lawns Company, she wanted to go to the Odysseia Hotel, located near the government. The coachman hoped that the lady did not mind taking a shortcut, for it had been dangerous to drive through the alleys lately because of the Red Crows. It is a notorious organization that commits crimes such as robberies, murders, and kidnappings, regardless of the status of the victim. Even Milena was uncomfortable, but she doubted that such bandits would operate in such a backwater alley. In addition, hooligans from the alley will never touch the carriage of a high-ranking aristocrat. There was also a simple communication device that was connected directly to the city guards. Therefore, one could just relax and enjoy the ride in a luxurious carriage. Looking out the window, Milena at some point discovered that they were driving past Iselba Street. At the same moment, she saw the house where Oscar's mistress, Serena, lives. In theory, it was incredibly beautiful, since it attracted the attention of the Duke, for whom all commoners were ordinary insects. However, the heroine was annoyed by the misunderstanding with Oscar, so she decided to stay away from it. Driving a little further, she suddenly saw a strange man who immediately attracted her attention. His face didn't look good in this rundown alley, and it wasn't clear what he had forgotten here. Despite his shabby appearance, he was holding a first-class wallet made of natural slit in his hands. In addition, the heroine was very surprised when she saw a real sword on his belt. She hoped that the stranger hadn't stolen it all from someone, because otherwise she would need to report it. Suddenly, 3 more guys appeared in front of him, looking very aggressive. Realizing that they could beat the poor guy, Milena immediately ordered the coachman to stop the cart. Of course, it had nothing to do with her and would surely end in a simple fight. But not wanting anyone to be attacked in front of her eyes, the girl hurried to call the city guard. She had reported the incident on behalf of the Duchess, so they would be here soon, but in the meantime they could quietly observe the situation. There were about 5 minutes left before the arrival of the guards, and Milena went out to assess the situation. Having noticed how the strange man staggered, she hoped that he would hold out for at least these 5 minutes. Hearing a strange sound from the direction of the scuffle, she was frightened, deciding that it was too late. But looking in that direction, the heroine was numb with shock, leading as 3 guys lay unconscious opposite that boy. Looking at the hero, who was pretty out of breath, she could not understand what had happened here at all. At that moment, the stranger shifted his gaze to the side and stared at her. Trembling with fear, the girl was shocked that he had single-handedly dealt with these people. Even though Milena originally just wanted to help him, she couldn't say a word out of fear. Suddenly, the guy began to confidently walk in her direction, bringing the heroine even more confusion. Stopping right in front of her, he was silent for a few seconds, after which his gaze began to dim. At the same time, he began to fall to his knees, which made the heroine completely taken aback. Being completely confused, she suddenly noticed that the color of his eyes began to change. Doomedly bowing his head, the young man suddenly decided that he should never be caught. Looking at the girl with tears, he pleadingly hoped to get a helping hand from her. As a justification, he believed that if he was caught, everything would come to an end. After that, the heroine slid to the ground in shock and the hero collapsed unconscious on her knees. After a while, the guard arrived and was very surprised to hear that the 3 had attacked the Duchess's carriage. The girl pretended to be returning from the bank, and perhaps they saw her purse, so they followed her. In the guard's opinion, this was very strange, since robbers usually rarely touch such luxurious carriages. Realizing that there was no other way out, Milena made a menacing face and decided to find out if he really thought she was a liar. The hero immediately apologized and, as it turned out, he was just surprised by a rare case, but did not doubt the heroine at all. She also pretended that these people were out of their minds, and then they started hitting each other, which made her scared. Worried that she had seen some strange people before, the girl hoped that the guard would have a wanted list. After receiving and looking at it, she saw that there was no one among the criminals who matched the description of that young man. Glad that he was at least not a wandering bandit, Milena was about to leave, but the hero suddenly stopped her. When she heard that she would have to go to the interrogation as a witness, she found it extremely difficult now. Making an angry look, she decided that she had already voluntarily told them about everything, and they would bother her with some kind of interrogation. Fortunately for the guard, the girl agreed to come, but not before tomorrow morning. If someone else had been in her place, it wouldn't have worked, but since it was the same Milena, it seemed even magnanimous. After a while, left alone with the mistress, the coachman was not sure if it was normal to do so. However, the heroine knew that the policy of the Redlands company was not to divulge any information about customers, and since he would have to testify to the city guard anyway, she decided to leave the hero some tips. Be that as it may, the coachman was still embarrassed by giving a false statement. But there was too much money to refuse, and he decided to continue driving Madame to the hotel. Agreeing with him, the heroine hurried to get into the carriage in which the same stranger was lying. She was afraid that it would be a little embarrassing to take this person directly to the hotel. Therefore, to begin with, it was decided to just drive along the streets of government offices. Soon the young man was bound hand and foot, still unconscious. Milena hoped that this would be enough to prevent him from escaping when he woke up. Just in case, she also put his sword away, placing it at the other end of the carriage cabin. After searching his pockets, the girl did not find any things by which he could be identified. She also strongly doubted that he was hiding any weapons. In addition, it suddenly turned out that the guy's muscles were much stronger than it seemed at first glance. From all this, she concluded that this was indeed an unusual person. His clothes under the cloak were dirty and smelly, but clearly not cheap, and the fabric was of high quality and well sewn. In addition to this, there was a luxurious embroidery on his sleeve, but why would he need it if he couldn't even see it? Obviously, this was the son of a noble family, but his condition was very alarming. Given Malena's position in the capital, she clearly couldn't have been unaware of this guy. In addition, if the son of an influential aristocrat disappeared, then missing leaflets would already be everywhere. Suddenly, she remembered that the sword of aristocrats usually had to be engraved with the family crest. Taking the blade and unsheathing it, the heroine really noticed something strange. The beginning of the blade coming out of the hilt was decorated with a creepy coat of arms, similar to the eye of a beast. Having never seen anything like this before, Malena sighed tiredly, deciding that she did not really understand anything. It remains only to check his wallet, which the hero so reverently held in his hands. Inside it, we managed to find only a notebook and a few vials of medicine, and all this was also luxury goods. There were no workshops in the capital for the production of flasks of this design, so they were most likely made outside of it. In addition, there was also a small notebook, which the heroine hurried to open. It was written that you need to take medication whenever its effect comes to an end and not worry about side effects. It became obvious that this drug was very strong, and probably the guy took the medicine, after which he began to walk the streets in delirium. It seemed that now he was in a situation where there was no other way out but to drink it. The girl suddenly realized that apparently she had picked up a noble lord whose life was in danger. A little later, the door of the small house where Serena lived began to slowly open. When she went outside, the girl no longer heard that strange noise and hoped that it was all over. Suddenly, she found a very beautiful locket lying right on the ground near her house. Taking it in her hands, Serena thought that such a piece of jewelry would look perfect on her. There was no one here anyway, and since the owner hadn't come to look for him, she could probably take him for herself. The girl really wanted to wear it right now, but decided to hide it for now, because otherwise Oscar would find out that she was leaving the house. Remembering him, she returned home and sat down on her bed with a sad look. Recently, the Duke had hardly come to see her, which greatly depressed Serena. Meanwhile, the head of the bank's branch decided that even if his lordship filed for divorce, Malena was still a duchess. Therefore, she could legally take out a loan in the name of his family, and thus the bank does not bear any responsibility for approval. If the Duke wanted to minimize his losses, then the best thing to do was to close this debt first. Enraged and humbly agreeing with him, Oscar realized that, unlike Lowell, he could not snap at the leader. Leaning back in his chair with an irritated look, he decided that the heroine had gone completely off the rails. According to rumors, she left the mansion with only the contents of her safe, and since she didn't have a penny, she decided to take out a loan. She hates the hero and therefore decided that the best way to take revenge would be to take a loan in his name. Burning with fierce anger, Oscar decided that if she did not come to beg him for forgiveness, he would certainly destroy her. Thinking that she still did not realize her deplorable situation, the Duke suddenly heard the bell again. Picking up the phone, he didn't understand who else might want to contact him other than the bank. Hearing the voice on the other end of the line, he also forgot about the loan and Malena, freezing on the spot with shock. The caller wanted to know if Oscar had managed to find the Archduke's nephew. This voice belonged to Adam, who was the head of the Red Ravens. After apologizing, the Duke completely forgot about this important matter, due to the fact that he was distracted by the divorce. Adam decided that now was not the time to postpone this search, and the Duke decided that he would not disappoint him anymore. In addition, it was a great honor for Oscar that the head took the trouble to contact him directly. Adam decided that if he did a good job, he would be even more glorious. Remembering what was at stake, the Duke intended to deal with it this time. Thanks to the help of the Red Ravens, he will even have a chance to get into the center of political action. The hero's task was to find one escaped person from the Duchy of Rohadam, bordering the kingdom. The fugitive was the son of the former Archduke Wilhelm and the nephew of the current Archduke Rudolf. He was a fair-haired young man with bright purple eyes named Ludwig Rohide. He was a terrible killer who killed his father and fled to the kingdom, after which he was put on the wanted list. It was difficult to launch a public investigation due to the lack of evidence, so Adam assigned the matter to the Duke of Cloudwell. Oscar understood that there were gaps in all this, because if Ludwig really wanted to get the position of Archduke, then why did he run away? Now the Grand Duchy is ruled by his uncle, and in the end, Rudolph is the only one who wins in the current situation. However, the hero decided not to go into details, because if he completes this task, then Oscar's entry into the Senate will become a reality. According to Adam himself, if the Duke makes his way into politics and makes a great contribution, then everyone will begin to reckon with him. And then, the hero will be able to try to remove the Crown Prince with the help of Red Ravens. And then Oscar's main dream will come true and he will finally be able to take his place on the throne. Intoxicated by these thoughts, the Duke decided that he would use not only mercenaries, but also journalists to find the fugitive. Praising him for his ingenuity, the head once again decided to remind Ludwig's external signs, after which he said goodbye. Having decided to do everything possible, Oscar understood that this was a one-of-a-kind opportunity for him. He was even willing to use the theater's leading actress, Nina Ford, and for this, he ordered the deputy to vacate her schedule for the next day. In addition, the employee had to contact journalists from 5 newspapers and 2 magazines to arrange a meeting for the next day. Also, it was necessary to tell Nina that she would need to practice in the purple spring bud. Thinking about it, the Duke began to remember what else he could have missed from what needed to be done. At that moment, the face of Milena, who was smiling sweetly at him, popped up in front of his eyes. He was very annoyed that the face of this woman periodically came to his mind. He decided that he needed to warn the heroine about something, and for this he needed to find out her whereabouts. At this time, tired of carefully examining the guy up and down, Milena sighed heavily. On the one hand, it was very good that she had saved this person, but it was not clear what to do with him now. She remembered the instruction that if you can't raise a street cat properly, then you shouldn't pick it up. But how could this hero be left in such a pitiful and completely shattered form? If it weren't for some circumstances related to the divorce, she would have just turned a blind eye and taken him with her. It was possible to do nothing while she was a duchess, but once the heroine inherited the title of Countess of Balthus, she would be very busy. And therefore, she did not understand at all what to do with this person. It was immediately obvious from his condition that he also had a hard time. With a wave of her hand, Milena decided to take care of him until tomorrow and then set him free. Looking at his bruised face, she decided that it would be okay if a day or 2 helped him. And when he wakes up, the heroine will give him advice and some money so that he can hide for a while. Hailing the coachman, she decided that they were not going to a hotel, but to an inn called Sala. After a while, waking up in deep confusion, the Duke began to convulsively grasp at the sheet. Everything was floating somewhere in front of his eyes, and he did not understand at all where he was now. Breathing heavily, she only knew that it was not the time and he had to leave. Jumping out of bed and staggering towards the door, the young man suddenly stopped in front of the mirror. Completely confused, he didn't understand who was this in the reflection. He knew for sure that he saw himself, but he could not recognize his appearance at all. Had his hair always been so faded beige? Who exactly is looking at him from the reflection now, and where exactly was he going to go? Suddenly, the Duke felt a sharp and intense pain in his head, after which the memories flooded into his mind. In the blood-stained room is the sad face of a man gazing intently at His Majesty. Betrayal and revenge sank deep into his soul because he dared to use it then, at the meeting. Gradually coming to his senses, the young man did not understand what these memories were. Perplexed by what was happening, he suddenly remembered the bright color of the young lady's red hair. Before he passed out, her eyes were the last thing he could see. With red hair and an alluring gaze, she resembled a scarlet sun bending toward sunset. At that moment, he suddenly heard the door to the room open and a girl entered who was glad to wake him up. Losing his mind for a couple of seconds, he suddenly saw her lying on the floor below him, in complete bewilderment. Looking at the young guy in surprise, Milena clearly did not expect such a turn. Not understanding what had just happened, the hero himself was at a complete loss. It turned out to be the same woman from his memories, and he did not understand how she ended up here. Seeing his confusion, the heroine decided to clarify that she was his savior, although for a moment she even regretted it. She heard loud noises from the room, and then she came in and wondered how he was feeling. At least he did not look very good, to put it mildly, which was a little alarming. From his appearance, Milena realized that he clearly had a sore throat and hurried to the table in the corner. Taking a glass of water from him, she handed it to the hero, hoping that he would not disdain to drink. After agreeing, the guy didn't know what was going on yet, but it didn't look like this girl was a bad person. Draining the glass in one gulp, he felt his throat instantly clear. As he walked back a little, he remembered the men who had decided to attack him. Thinking that they were working for that person, the guy wanted to knock them out and grab them, but they fought so terribly that they were definitely not his people. The hero did not remember the man himself, however. He was constantly chasing him, and the guy could not allow himself to be captured. Obviously, if he is caught, then at best he will face a quick death. Realizing that he could not die, the hero again felt a strong pain in his head. Watching him writhe in agony, the heroine wanted him to stop thinking about anything. The first thing he needed to do now was to rest a little without unnecessary thoughts. The hero decided to find out if she had brought him here, and, as it turned out, he even asked her to do it himself. Milena thought that if he was lying outside, he would surely die. Looking into her eyes in bewilderment, the guy became more and more convinced that she was a good person. Remembering something important, the girl turned around abruptly and headed for the door, wanting the hero to wait for her a little. With the appearance of an obedient puppy, the guy safely sat down on the bed, deciding that the savior must be obeyed. A few minutes later, she returned to him, holding his sword and other belongings in her hands. The hero was very surprised to see the blade, and Milena hoped that he remembered it. She wondered if she could find out his identity, so the girl rummaged through his belongings a little, hoping for leniency. As she handed him the sword, she pointed to the family pattern engraved next to the hilt. However, the guy could not remember him even then. She handed him the wallet. After getting all his belongings back, the Duke still couldn't remember anything. The only thing that clearly and vividly popped up in his memory was the face of his savior. Greatly puzzled, the heroine hoped that he would at least remember who he was. Besides, she didn't understand why he was staring so intently at her. Suddenly crying, the guy began to apologize for the fact that he really could not remember anything. Taken aback by his tears, the girl froze in confusion for a while. Taking the handkerchief, she decided that it was normal not to remember, and there was no need to force herself. His identity would be confirmed with a sword, so it was necessary to take care of him. In addition, the guy is probably still being chased by those people, so it is better for him to hide for now. Milena sincerely hoped that the hero understood everything and decided that it would be better for him to stay here for a while, and she would help with food. As she was about to leave, she suddenly heard the guy call out to her and turned to him. The young man wanted to express his sincere gratitude to the girl for her help. The heroine is used to seeing only the arrogant Oscar, and such a kind guy was new to her. Smiling at him, she hoped that he would take care of himself and wished him good night. The next morning, a small inn in the distance was illuminated by bright sunlight. Coming in before leaving to visit the hero, the girl was glad to learn that he slept very well thanks to her. But most of all, she was pleased that this time he heard a knock on the door and did not rush at her. Suddenly, she noticed that he had already packed all his things and was surprised by his sudden decision to leave. When she found out that he had decided to go with her, the heroine was confused, considering it not the best idea. And she went to see him only to find out if everything was all right before leaving. Looking at his dull face, Milena felt guilty for some reason. Knowing that he was now in a difficult situation, she hoped that he would be able to return to his former place. In addition, after giving him a solid wad of banknotes, she thought that for a while it should be enough for him. Also, the heroine paid for his accommodation in this tavern for a few days in advance, so there was nothing to worry about. In any case, she was not in a position to hide anyone now. Understanding her worries, the guy apologized for the trouble caused. He decided that he would leave here after he had settled everything with that man, and to this, the heroine wished him good luck. She also wanted him to remember her advice and take a little more rest. Going down to the first floor, the girl found out that the carriage had already been called. This was done by a mercenary she hired, and she hoped that he would also take care of the safety of that guy. She really wanted to believe that he would really be okay. At this moment, the hero leaned his face to the window, seeing off his savior with a sad look. Milena was very worried that he had so sincerely trusted a man with whom he had known for one day. Now she had the feeling that she was leaving one helpless child, and it was hard for her to overcome the desire to take him. Turning sharply to the carriage, she resolutely pulled herself together and began to sit inside. Now you couldn't do what you couldn't take responsibility for, and you had to focus on what was more important. Arriving at the guard building, the investigation ended very quickly, and soon the heroine and the coachman safely went outside. The girl was delighted with the hero's work, and now he had to focus only on his safety. Everything ended easily, thanks to the notoriety that Milena gained at the beginning. Now that she had extinguished the so-called raging fire, it was possible to take care of the capital's mansion of Count Baltus. Suddenly, a familiar guy appeared in front, wandering along the street with a confused look. To the heroine's great surprise, it turned out to be the same hero who, in theory, remained in the tavern. Approaching her, the young man apologized, because he did not intend to follow her at all. The girl did not understand why he had followed her at all, but in response she received only a confused silence. Blushing heavily, the Duke remembered hearing through the window about the destination of the savior. As it turned out, he lost his mind again and walked here, after which, already here, he regained consciousness. Milena was very surprised by his words that he was moving completely unconsciously. Was it because he had forgotten everything and she was the first person the hero met? He seems to think she's the only one to hold on to in this world. The guy continued to apologize, and after calming him down, the girl decided that it would be better for him to return to the inn. Agreeing to this, the hero first wanted to return something to her, and with a straight face, he handed over the received bundle of money. Taken aback, Milena wanted to answer, when suddenly she heard mocking exclamations that she was engaged in charity. It was difficult not to recognize this voice because as soon as she heard it, she immediately began to gag reflex. Not understanding where Oscar came from, the heroine decided that it was better for him to go his own way. Sneering, the Duke was surprised that she still hadn't gotten rid of the habit of wasting money. In turn, the girl was perplexed that his lordship stooped to run after his wife, from whom he was divorced. Furious, Oscar decided that these were not good words for someone who was doing the wrong thing on behalf of another person. She decided that if he was so sorry for this money, then he could simply deduct it from the amount of alimony to be paid. Being confused by his incredible persistence, Milena decided that he could go and talk to Serena about it. After saying that, the Duke instantly went mad with anger and looked at the girl furiously. They were in the center of a busy city, in front of the guard post. In a place like this, the reputation-obsessed Oscar would never do anything with her. However, suddenly, he grabbed her hand and Milena decided that if he didn't let go, she would scream. Deciding that no one would believe her anyway, the Duke wanted to lock the girl in his house until she compensated for his losses. Horrified by his words, the heroine remembered her cell, the contents of which would be destroyed in 6 days. Not knowing what to do, she was forced to follow him, frantically trying to come up with a plan to escape. Suddenly, standing between them, the young man gripped the Duke's hand tightly. Looking at him furiously, Oscar didn't understand what this guy was doing. But the hero also decided to find out why he does this to a lady if she does not want it. The Duke was shocked and decided that a tramp like him should not meddle in aristocratic affairs, but rather go begging further. After that, he ordered the heroine to immediately approach him, because his patience is not infinite. However, continuing to cover the girl with his body, the hero flatly refused to let her near him. Deciding that this beggar did not know his place, Oscar demanded that his master be brought immediately. The young man didn't even flinch and just continued to stare at him. Milena, meanwhile, was in a stupor, because the situation was such that a person of unknown origin dared to confront the Duke. That meant that she needed to protect him somehow, because she couldn't pretend she didn't know who had helped her. Confidently peeking out from behind the hero, the heroine was happy to introduce Oscar to her bodyguard. And did the Duke really have any questions about the fact that the guards were protecting their lady? Both heroes turned to her at the same time, completely confused. Oscar then decided to clarify that even if it was her bodyguard, shouldn't he behave appropriately with him? Having learned this lesson, Milena wanted to leave, or maybe she wanted to go to the guards and find out whose rights had been infringed. Furious, the Duke decided that he had no reason to come to her since she had secretly taken out a loan in his name. But the girl decided to clarify that the true root of this problem was his beautiful mistress. At the same time, she understood that everything was fine now, and only, thanks to this guy, everything ended easily. The heroine was surprised at how much he blushed with joy that she considered him her bodyguard. Not understanding how much longer Oscar intended to stand like this, Milena wanted him to stop blocking their path immediately. In any case, he was fundamentally wrong in trying to take her away by force and against her will. If the Duke still wants to take her with him, then as long as her guard is nearby, he will not be able to cope alone. Well, if he wants to call his people for help, then he better hurry up with it. After all, she wasn't sure if they would still be here when Oscar's assistants arrived. Blush with anger and his own powerlessness, the Duke turned around and, pretending that he had an important meeting, rushed away. After waiting for him to go away, Milena turned sharply to her bodyguard. Grabbing his hand, she wanted him to follow her quickly. Entering the alley between the houses, the girl finally stopped and breathed a sigh of relief. She was sure that Oscar or other people would notice them in this secluded place. Turning to the hero once again, she did not understand why he intervened. After all, it was very dangerous. Of course, everything went perfectly, but it was too reckless. With the air of a beaten dog, the guard sighed heavily, deciding that he had made a mistake. Looking at him in bewilderment, these words were clearly not what the girl wanted to hear. She was forced to admit that his actions really helped, which immediately encouraged the guard. Laughing, Milena was even glad that he had followed her. The hero hoped that he could repay the benefactor who saved him. Smiling back, the heroine decided that they were in full calculation. Bowing in appreciation, the young man felt great gratitude to her. Suddenly, he remembered about the money and immediately took out the banknotes to give them to the girl. After that, he turned around and decided to finally leave her, when suddenly, Milena called out to him. Even though she had decided not to act impulsively, it was hard to restrain herself now. This man, who reacts to her every word, attracted the attention of the heroine. Looking away, she decided that she really needed a bodyguard. Hearing the hero's exclamation of admiration, she decided to take her words back for a second, but when she saw his face, she immediately changed her mind. With tears of joy, the Duke hoped that he would now be able to follow her. After a while, sitting in his office, the Duke was in a drooping state after what had happened. He was able to find out about Milena's movements from his deputy, but why did this poor guard give up to her? Oscar thought he would feel better when he saw her clinging to him again. If only he could use the red crows as he saw fit, things would be different. To do this, the Duke needs to complete his task as soon as possible and increase his power. Calling the deputy and learning that Nina was waiting in the corridor, Oscar demanded to call her to him immediately. He had wasted a lot of time because everything had gone awry. Therefore, he needed to stop worrying about Milena and other useless nonsense. Believing that more grandiose plans awaited him, he saw a blonde lady with ruby eyes enter the office.